The mysterious awakening. The air was thick with a strange, sweet smell. A dim blue light pulsed softly from the walls, making the whole room feel alive. It was not metal, not stone, something in between. Ethan's eyes flickered open. His head throbbed, and his body felt heavy like he had been asleep for years. He tried to move, but his limbs responded sluggishly. The bed beneath him was warm, too soft, almost like it was breathing. Panic rushed through him. Where am I? He sat up quickly, his heart pounding. That's when he saw her. A tall woman stood near the edge of the room, watching him with deep violet eyes. She wasn't human. Her skin shimmered faintly, shifting between pale blue and silver, as if reflecting unseen light. Long strands of dark hair fell over her shoulders, moving slightly as if carried by an invisible breeze. She smiled softly. "You are awake." Her voice was smooth, melodic. Ethan felt a strange pull in his chest, as if he knew her. But he didn't. Who are you?" he croaked, his throat dry. "Where am I?" The woman took a step closer. "Ethan, it's me, Zyra." The name meant nothing to him. He shook his head, pushing himself off the strange bed. His legs wobbled, but he forced himself to stand. "You know me," she said gently. "You might not remember yet, but you do." Ethan backed away, his breathing shallow. This was wrong. He didn't know her. He didn't know any of this. "This is some kind of mistake," he muttered, glancing around the strange room. There were no doors, no windows, just smooth walls that pulsed with soft blue light. "What is this place? What do you want from me?" Zyra's face fell. She looked hurt. "Ethan, you promised me you would stay." His stomach twisted. That wasn't possible. He had never met her before. He had never. A sudden, sharp pain shot through his skull. Ethan gasped, gripping his head as blurry images flashed in his mind. Himself and Zyra, standing together under a red sky, her fingers brushing against his face, his voice whispering words he couldn't understand. Then, darkness. Ethan staggered back, breathing hard. "What was that?" he growled. "What did you do to me?" Zyra's eyes filled with sadness. "I didn't do anything, Evan. It's your mind. It's trying to remember." No, this wasn't real. He was being tricked. Before he could demand more answers, the walls of the room suddenly shifted. A hidden door slid open with a soft hiss. Ethan spun around. A group of tall figures stepped inside. They wore armor, sleek, dark, with glowing blue symbols on their chests. Their faces were covered with smooth helmets, and each carried a long metallic weapon strapped to their backs. One of them, taller than the rest, spoke in a deep voice. "He's awake." Zyra turned sharply. "You can't take him yet. He's not ready." The armored figure ignored her and took a step forward. The ritual must begin. Ethan's pulse spiked. Ritual? What ritual? He had heard enough. He wasn't going to stand here and let them do whatever they planned. Without thinking, he lunged toward the open doorway, trying to break past them. But he didn't make it far. The tall soldier moved impossibly fast. A heavy hand grabbed Ethan's shoulder, forcing him back. He struggled, but the strength of the armored figure was inhuman. Zyra rushed forward, placing herself between Ethan and the soldiers. "Please, just a little more time." His mind is still adjusting. The soldier hesitated. Then, slowly, he stepped back. "You have until the next cycle," he said coldly. "Then he comes with us." Without another word, the soldiers turned and walked away. The door slid shut behind them, sealing Ethan inside with Zyra once more. Ethan's breath came fast. His heart pounded so hard, he thought it might explode. "What the hell was that?" he demanded. "Who were they? What ritual?" Zyra didn't answer right away. She looked at him with quiet sorrow. "You don't remember now," she whispered. "But soon, you will." Ethan clenched his fists. He had no idea who this woman was. No idea where he was, but one thing was clear. He needed to escape. The impossible truth. Ethan's breath was still heavy, his heart slamming against his ribs. The words of the armored figure echoed in his mind. The ritual must begin. What ritual? Why did they want him? And why did Zyra act like she cared about him? He needed to get out of here. He turned to the walls, smooth, pulsing with blue light, no visible doors, no escape. He clenched his fists. Trapped. Zyra watched him, her violet eyes full of sadness. Ethan, please, I know you're scared, but you have to listen. He scoffed. Listen, you expect me to believe I belong here, that I know you. I don't even know my own name until you say it. Zyra took a slow step forward. You don't remember, but your heart does. Something in her voice sent a chill through him. Then she lifted her hand, and the room shifted. The walls rippled like water, and suddenly, the space around them changed. Ethan staggered back as images surrounded him. Holograms, memories, moments stolen from a life he didn't remember. He saw himself, laughing, fighting, standing beside Zyra on an alien battlefield. He looked different, stronger, older. His eyes were fierce, burning with purpose. Then he saw something else, himself and Zyra, hands intertwined, standing under a glowing sky. She whispered something to him. He whispered something back. His chest tightened. This isn't real, he muttered. This is a trick. Zyra's face fell. No, Ethan. This is the truth. He turned away, pressing his hands to his temples. His head ached. His skull felt like it would crack open. The images faded, but the feeling remained. Your memories were erased, Zyra continued softly. You chose to forget. Ethan snapped his head up. What? Zyra took a breath, her voice barely above a whisper. You asked me to take them away. Silence. Ethan's legs felt weak. He staggered, gripping the side of the strange bed for support. You're lying, he said, though his voice shook. I wish I was. Zyra's expression was full of pain. But I promised you, Ethan, if you ever wanted to remember, I would show you. Ethan wanted to deny it, to fight it, but something deep inside him, something buried, stirred. Before he could speak, a loud alarm blared through the room. A robotic voice echoed. Warning. Intruders detected. Unidentified vessels approaching. Zyra's expression turned to fear. No, they found us. Ethan's body tensed. Who found us? Before she could answer, the entire ship shook with a violent explosion. The lights flickered. The air trembled. The walls hissed as if the ship itself was gasping for breath. Then, from beyond the locked door, the sound of heavy footsteps. Something was coming. Cliffhanger. Who are the intruders? Why did Ethan erase his own memories? And what is the ritual that the armored figures spoke of? The Great Escape. The ship shook violently. The walls pulsed with red emergency lights, casting everything in a blood-like glow. Boom. Another explosion rocked the room, making Ethan stumble. Dust and sparks rained from above. The air smelled of burning metal. A voice echoed through the speakers. Security breach. Hostiles boarding. All units, defend the core. Ethan's instincts screamed, run, now. But he was still trapped. No weapon, no idea what was happening. Only the sound of marching boots coming closer. Zyra grabbed his wrist. We have to move. He yanked his hand back. Move where? I don't even know what's happening. Zyra turned to the door, pressing her palm against the smooth surface. The alien symbols lit up under her fingers. The wall shivered, then slid open. Outside, the hallway was in chaos. Alien soldiers, some like the armored ones from before, others unfamiliar, were locked in brutal combat. Strange energy weapons fired bright beams of blue and green light. Explosions rattled the walls. Ethan's breath caught. This wasn't just an attack. It was a war. A soldier rushed toward them. 7 feet tall, heavy armor, glowing red visor. He lifted a massive weapon, aiming straight at Ethan's chest. No time to think. Ethan moved on instinct. He dropped low, twisting sideways as the weapon fired. The energy beam scorched the wall where he had been standing just seconds ago. Before the soldier could fire again, Zaira struck. Her hands glowed purple as she sent a shockwave of energy toward him. The armored figure flew back, slamming into the wall with a sickening crunch. Ethan's mind reeled. What the hell was that? Zaira didn't answer. She grabbed his arm and pulled him into a sprint. They ran through the burning corridors, dodging debris, stepping over fallen bodies. The air was thick with smoke and static. Every few seconds, the ship groaned, like it was about to break apart. Ahead, a massive window revealed a terrifying sight. A fleet of alien warships surrounded them, their cannons glowing with deadly light. "This ship won't last," Zaira panted. "We need to get out. Now." Ethan clenched his jaw. Out? Out where? They were in space. Before he could argue, a blast of energy tore through the wall beside them. Fire and debris exploded outward, sending both of them flying. Ethan hit the ground hard, his ears ringing. Through the smoke, he saw a dark silhouette moving toward them. A new enemy. This one was different. Taller, thinner, its body sleek and insect-like, with sharp, curved weapons attached to its arms. Its glowing red eyes locked onto Ethan. He barely had time to react before it lunged. Cliffhanger. Who is the new enemy? Can Ethan and Zaira escape the doomed ship? And why does Ethan fight like a warrior when he doesn't remember ever being one? The forgotten bond. Ethan gasped for air as he woke up, his body aching. His vision blurred, but he could hear rain. Heavy, warm, unnatural. It drummed against giant leaves and splattered onto his skin. The last thing he remembered was the ship. Explosions, fire, Zaira pulling him into an escape pod, then blackness. Now he was lying on the damp ground of an alien jungle. The sky above wasn't blue, but a deep purple, streaked with swirling green clouds. Strange floating creatures glowed faintly as they drifted through the air. The trees were massive, their roots twisting like living veins. He pushed himself up, wincing. His muscles felt like he had been torn apart and put back together. Then he saw her. Zaira lay a few feet away, unconscious. Her silver-blue skin was streaked with cuts, her breathing shallow. She wasn't moving. Panic surged through him. "Zaira." He crawled over, shaking her gently. "Come on, wake up." For a terrifying moment, she didn't respond. Then she let out a soft groan and opened her glowing violet eyes. Relief crashed over him like a wave. "You're alive," he breathed. A small, tired smile crossed her lips. "I told you, I'd never leave you behind." Ethan sat back, running a hand through his messy hair. "Where are we?" Zaira pushed herself up slowly, scanning the surroundings. A hunting planet. Dangerous. Her eyes flickered toward the thick shadows between the trees. "We won't be alone for long." That made Ethan's skin crawl. He glanced down at himself. His clothes were torn, his arms covered in bruises. He felt useless. "We need to move," Zaira said. Before, a deep guttural growl cut through the jungle. Ethan's blood turned ice cold. From the darkness, something moved. Massive. Stalking. Watching. Zaira's voice was barely a whisper. "They've already found us." Ethan's heart slammed against his ribs. His body tensed, ready to run. But something strange happened. His vision blurred for a second. Then suddenly, memories flickered through his mind. A battlefield. A beast lunging toward him. His own hands gripping a weapon, moving without fear. It was like he had fought here before. But how? He had no time to question it. The jungle erupted with movement. The hunt had begun. The lost war. Ethan ran. Branches whipped against his face as he tore through the jungle, his breath ragged. The ground was wet, the air thick with the smell of something rotten. Behind him, heavy footsteps crashed through the undergrowth. Something massive was chasing them. Zira sprinted beside him, her movements swift despite her injuries. Faster, she gasped. A deafening roar split the air. The ground trembled beneath them. Ethan risked a glance over his shoulder. A nightmare was coming. It was not an animal. Towering over 10 feet tall, its body was a fusion of metal and flesh. Its glowing red eyes locked onto him. The creature's arms ended in jagged claws made of living steel. Its skin pulsed with dark energy, like it was barely contained inside its monstrous frame. But the worst part, it felt familiar. His mind screamed at him, whispered things he couldn't understand. A flash of memory shot through him. A battlefield. This same creature. Blood everywhere. His own hands, gripping a weapon. His own voice, shouting orders. He had fought this thing before, but he didn't remember how. His foot caught on a root. He crashed to the ground. The beast let out a distorted screech and lunged. Zira threw herself between them, her hands glowing. A pulse of purple energy slammed into the creature, sending it skidding backward. "Get up," she shouted. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, his heart pounding. His body wanted to run, but something deep inside him, something older, something buried, wanted to fight. Zira's voice was urgent. "Ethan, listen to me. That thing, it was made to hunt you." He turned to her, chest heaving. "What?" She swallowed hard. "It's a bioengineered soldier. A war machine. Your war machine." His blood ran cold. "You built this," he whispered. Zira shook her head. "No, you were supposed to lead them. But when you betrayed your people, they turned against you." Ethan's vision blurred. His people, his war, his betrayal. The beast recovered, shaking off the blast. It wasn't done. Neither was Ethan. Something inside him snapped. His fingers curled into fists. His stance shifted, instinct taking over. He didn't know how. He didn't know why. But one thing was clear. He was done running. The final stand. The jungle was on fire. Thick, black smoke curled into the alien sky, swallowing the stars. The bioengineered hunter lay in a crumpled heap, its metal limbs twitching, its red eyes flickering like a dying ember. Ethan stood over it, breathing hard, hands trembling. He had done this. He had killed it. But he didn't remember how. The battle had been a blur, a storm of instincts and movements his body knew, but his mind didn't. He fought like a warrior, like a leader, like a man he didn't recognize. Zira limped toward him, her violet eyes searching his face. "You're remembering, aren't you?" Ethan exhaled sharply. Not enough. Before she could respond, a deep hum vibrated through the air. Ethan turned toward the sky. His stomach dropped. They had arrived. Above the burning jungle, massive warships descended through the clouds. Sleek, dark, their hulls pulsing with eerie blue lights. Dozens of smaller crafts shot out from their underbellies, streaking toward the ground. Reinforcements. Zira paled. "They won't stop until they take you back." Ethan's jaw clenched. "I'm not going anywhere." Zira reached out, gripping his wrist. "Ethan, listen to me. They don't need to capture you. They just need to destroy you." His fingers tightened into fists. He was done being hunted. The first wave of enemy soldiers hit the ground like thunder. Dark armor, glowing weapons, helmets that reflected the fire around them. Ethan's mind flashed again. A battlefield. Thousands of them kneeling before him, saluting, waiting for his command. The realization slammed into him like a bullet. They weren't just hunting him. They were his army. His throat went dry. "I wasn't just part of the war, was I?" Zira's voice was barely a whisper. "No, you were the one who started it." The past Ethan had been running from, was a past he had built with his own hands. And now, it had come to claim him. The final battle had begun. The truth or death. Ethan stood amidst the smoldering wreckage of the battlefield, the acrid scent of burnt metal and ozone filling the air. The remnants of his former army lay scattered around him, their once formidable forms now lifeless husks. Zara approached cautiously, her violet eyes reflecting the flickering flames. "Ethan," she began softly, "do you remember now?" He turned to her, memories flooding back with overwhelming clarity. He saw himself not just as a leader, but as the architect of a devastating weapon, a device capable of erasing memories and rewriting identities. He had used it on entire civilizations, believing it was the only way to maintain control and prevent rebellion. But when he met Zara, everything changed. She showed him a different path, one of compassion and understanding. Realizing the monstrosity of his actions, Ethan had used the device on himself, attempting to erase his past and start anew. Now, confronted with the full weight of his sins, Ethan felt a crushing guilt. "I remember," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. "I remember everything." Zara reached out, placing a comforting hand on his shoulder. "The past is immutable, Ethan, but the future is yet unwritten. What will you choose to do now?" Before he could respond, a low hum resonated from the horizon. A massive vessel, unlike any he had ever seen, descended from the sky. It bore the insignia of an ancient race, one that was thought to be long extinct, a race that Ethan himself had nearly annihilated. The ship landed, and a delegation emerged. At their forefront was a figure draped in flowing robes, their face obscured. They approached Ethan and Zara, stopping a few paces away. "Ethan," the figure spoke, their voice echoing with 1,000 tones, "you have been judged for your transgressions. But even in our suffering, we have found the capacity for forgiveness." Ethan fell to his knees, overwhelmed. "I don't deserve forgiveness. I've caused immeasurable pain." "Perhaps," the figure replied, "but redemption is not about deserving. It's about choosing to make amends." They extended a hand toward Ethan. "Join us. Help us rebuild what was lost. Use your knowledge to heal, rather than destroy." Zara nodded, her eyes filled with hope. "This is your chance, Ethan. A chance to truly atone." Taking a deep breath, Ethan grasped the offered hand, rising to his feet. I will do whatever it takes to make things right." As they boarded the vessel, Ethan looked back at the battlefield one last time. The flames had died down, and in their place, new life was beginning to emerge, a symbol of renewal and the possibility of a brighter future.